Julia Gillard, thanks for joining me on UpFront. You were the first female Prime Minister of Australia between 2010 and 2013, and you're now chair of the Global Partnership for Education, the GPE. How tough is your new job?
Well, it's not quite like the old job. There's a relentlessness with being a political leader, with being Prime Minister, that I can't say I have to live through now. But in terms of the intellectual challenges, the policy challenges and the things that we're trying to achieve around the world, it's a pretty big vision, and so I find it very energising. We simply want to get every child into school, and a quality school. Easy to say, very hard to do, and so I'm finding in the life post-politics that some of the things I best enjoyed about politics, policy challenges, delivery, making a difference, are still with me, and some of the things about media scrutiny, etc., have fallen away a little bit.
We'll come back to the media scrutiny a bit later, but let's talk about your ambitious goals. The Millennium Development Goals were established by the UN in 2000. One of those goals was to get every child into primary education. That's been missed. It was supposed to be done by 2015. 57 million children are still not in primary school around the world today. How do you get those 57 million into school, given the last 15 years we haven't been able to?
I think we've got to reassure ourselves, looking back on the last 15 years, that a big difference has been made. I mean, the number of children out of school has gone down by 40%, so that shows we can do it. But the children who are still out of school are often the hardest to reach children, the girls, the children in conflict and fragile affected countries, children who are in rural areas. So we want to make sure that we're reaching those children as well, and lifting ambition to secondary school. So the estimate is there are around 124 million children of primary and lower secondary age who aren't in school. Our determination at the Global Partnership for Education is to keep doing what we've been doing. We know it's effective, we know it gets children into school, we know it makes a difference for gender parity, but we do need to see more resourcing around the world for education, or we're going to miss the new Sustainable Development Goal as well.
You're right that a lot of progress was made in getting to those goals, but there's still this number of children who haven't made it into school, and other goals were missed as well. I'm just wondering, who's to blame, do you think, for missing those Millennium Goal targets? Is it stingy rich countries, or is it poor countries wasting the aid money? Where does the blame lie? I
think when they're global goals, we've all got to feel some of the responsibility thump on our own shoulders. Of course, we want to see donor nations step up more, and at GPE we advocate that. We want the number of countries who are donors to increase. There are emerging countries around the world with more and more economic capacity who can make more available through foreign aid. And we want to see effective and good governance in developing countries. And key to our model is that developing countries themselves step up, put more into education, and obviously there is a lot of accountability for how they're going to use the money.
China, I believe, was the biggest single recipient of education aid in recent years. Given China's now the biggest economy in the world, was that a sensible move? Could that money have been better directed towards Chad or other countries more in need than China?
Well, certainly China has not been on our radar as the Global Partnership for Education. We are working in some of the poorest places on earth, many in Africa, but some in my own region of the world, thinking of places like PNG and Cambodia, some of the Pacific Islands. So we are really trying to make a difference for the children who are in the hardest to reach places and the poorest countries. But can I give you one statistic which gives us a sense of how doable this all is if we work together? On average, it costs $1.18 a day to educate a child in a developing country, primary and secondary school. When we look at what developing countries are spending now, they're already acquitting 88% of that burden. So if we find the 14 cents more per day, then we will have enough resources to educate those children. And I think that's a key to ensuring that we live on a peaceful and prosperous planet, because the evidence is overwhelming that if you give kids the best start, then the lives that they will lead will be quite different than if they didn't get education, and it's intergenerational. Their children and their children's children will live better lives.
It's intergenerational. There's also a gender gap, of course, and the Sustainable Development Goals that have replaced the Millennium Development Goals now aims to do even more ambitious things like achieve gender equality by 2030. Is that realistic? The gender gap has proved pretty intractable in recent years. I think something like 1 in 12 girls is out of the classroom rather than 1 in 10 boys. Almost 15 million girls will never set foot in a classroom, says the UN.
Look, I understand the dimensions of the challenge here, and it breaks my heart that if we just keep going at current rates of change, it won't be until 2111 that we see the first generation of sub-Saharan African girls to universally go to primary and lower secondary schools. So we won't live to see it, you know, generations to come won't live to see it. It's that far away. But I'm confident that if we get the right mix of resources and ways of working, we can make a difference. In GPE's countries where we've been working, we've seen enrolment of girls in primary school go from just over 50% to almost 70%. So progress is possible. And yes, there are cultural attitudes to deal with, but poverty is the big thing. It is poverty that is keeping so many girls out of school. And if you change the equation for families through school feeding programs, even cash transfer programs.
Do you think culture is often used as an excuse by people who don't want to do more? Maybe in the West they say, well, those people, they're never going to send their daughters to school.
Well, I think it would be lazy intellectually of us to say they are never going to send their daughters to school.
Exactly.
We can point to a nation like Afghanistan where we've been working since 2011, and now you can see enrolment of girls in school increasing. It is possible to persuade that girls should go to school. Often having female teachers makes a difference, having female sanitation facilities at the school makes a difference, safety programs make a difference, but so too does changing the economic equation for the family. They might be so poor they need that girl to take goods to market or to do the domestic chores so someone else can take goods to market or to work on the land. If we change that equation by saying your girl will get a big nutritious meal or there will be a cash transfer program to reward you for changing your girl's life, then people will.
You've talked about the importance of resourcing and donor nations stepping forward. One of the things you said when you took the job of chairing the GP was that you would bring some Australian bluntness to it and ensure that rich countries keep their pledge to poor countries. And you said the global community must respond generously. The thing is, Oxfam in Australia were pretty blunt about your record on aid as Australian Prime Minister in 2013. They accused you of broken promises and of delivering a, quote, harsh punch to the world's poorest.
I understand that people will look at my record in politics, and one thing that gives me is the ability to say to leaders around the world, I know what it's like to sit around a cabinet table, a decision-making table, to try and get your budget in the right shape. I particularly know what it's like in the days post the global financial crisis, where people have had very stretched and stressed budgets and revenue has been plummeting. Yes, we made a set of decisions about our aid budget in that environment.
Do you regret delaying your original pledge on aid by 2 years, I think it was?
We were still seeing growth every year, and we needed to make a responsible set of decisions across a whole government budget where, yes, we were needing to deal with new efficiencies in health and education as well as what we had to do in foreign aid. So I get it. But the long-term direction of travel is what matters. For Australia, when I was Prime Minister, our aid budget was continuing to increase year on year, and that's what I would like to see for nations around the world. And I'd like to see them focus on education as the biggest change agent for all of the Sustainable Development Goals.